Welcome to a Lenten journey through the book of Acts. My name is Todd Seifert, and I have the privilege of being your tour guide through this book. I'm really looking forward to taking this trek with you through the book that records the history of the earliest days of the church, the expansion of the Christian witness, and the foundations of what we now call the Church Universal. My day job is the communications director for the Great Plains Conference of the United Methodist Church, but I'm also heavily involved in my local church and have facilitated disciple Bible study, taught confirmation class, and I've led Sunday school for all ages for 20 plus years. I also host a podcast titled In Layman's Terms that focuses on discipleship stories and Bible study. Now, some people may ask, why study Acts at a time when we should focus on the death and resurrection of Christ? And I understand that confusion. But here's what swayed me to consider Acts as one of the best books to study during Lent. I looked at the dates. Let me explain. Our Gospels, which tell the story of Jesus, were written in a fairly short succession to each other, with Mark likely being the first, Matthew and Luke using Mark as one of the sources, and then there's John, which is very different. And we'll get into that a little bit toward the end of our class. These were all likely written between about 62 and 70 A.D. So when we look at the events that took place in Acts, starting in about 30 A.D. with the ascension of Christ, and concluding at some point between 64 and 67 A.D. with Paul landing in Rome, that means the Acts of the Apostles recorded in this book likely all took place prior to the Gospels being widely circulated. They may have even been just oral stories of that time, shared among believers at the time when Peter, Paul, and others mentioned in Acts were doing their work. So when we read about the testimonies given within the passages of Acts, we need to remember that they're doing this without access to the Gospels that we're so readily available to us today. And I think that's significant. It's also important to remember that Acts is a sequel to the book of Luke. There's a tremendous continuity between the Gospel of Luke and the book that we're going to be exploring. And finally, along our journey, we'll take a few short detours to look at a few concepts from some of the letters of the New Testament written chronologically as the events unfold in Acts. So we'll read parts of James, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, and Romans, because those pieces of correspondence likely were written while the events in Acts were playing out. So what about the construction of the course? Well, here's some details you'll want to know. Each day you'll want to log into Blackboard. That's the platform that we'll use. And you'll do a couple of things each day. This is the link that Lisa Buffum from Be a Disciple sent to you to log in to this class right now. That's what you'll go to every day. First of all, check the announcements area. If anything comes up that you'll need to know, I'll post that information so that nobody misses it. Next, click on the Assignments tab. I'll share a brief devotion each day, usually with a question or two for reflection for that part of our Lenten journey. I encourage you to jot your answers down in a journal or on a piece of paper or just on a computer document so that you can go back to them later. I think you'll find it helpful, especially as you circle around to the end of this class. Finally, you can click on discussion boards. Once there, you'll click on Create Thread to see the questions and to provide your own answers. This is also where you'll reply to posts from participants. Now, I realize it's easy to get behind. I've taken these classes myself and life happens. So other than the first Saturday, February 29th, I'll try to leave your weekends free. You can use these days either as the Sabbath or as a way to catch up on discussion boards. You can always stay up to date or even ahead on the reading by clicking on the Course Materials tab in the left navigation bar. I've placed the day-by-day reading list there so there won't be any surprises and so you can work ahead if you want to. Sometimes they're busier than others. I know I always liked it when a teacher did that for me, so I was able to read ahead on days that I had free and not feel so badly when I had work interfere and I couldn't get to it on the day that it was due. I've always also put the numbers of the days of our assignments, so you'll always know what assignment we're on and which assignments match up with the discussion boards. I'll also place some supplemental materials in the course materials area as well. Sometimes there'll be maps, sometimes handouts that I've developed over the years, especially as I've explored this book of Acts over the last year myself. There'll be some other books that we'll explore as well, and I mentioned those a little bit earlier. The first week is exclusively in the book of Acts. We'll explore some of the stories of the early church, what happens right after Jesus ascends to heaven, miracles performed by the disciples, and what life was like for those first believers. As you read this week, try to put yourself in the room or in the crowd. Try to visualize what is described. I think it will make the words you read that much more alive to you. Throughout our time together, feel free to contact me with questions or concerns at any point during the class. You can reach me by clicking the Email Your Instructor in the left navigation bar, Or you can send me an email, which you'll find in my bio. It's tseifert@greatplainsumc.org. I'm so happy that you're taking this Lenten journey with me. My prayer is that we'll learn as we go, thanks to the teachings and actions of those very first people called Christians.